Hey, travel brats.
Happy Travel Brad Tuesday.
It's Soph.
And Nat and Sophia. Today, I'm going to start off our episode by giving you three descriptors that are hints about the city that we're visiting. And
Ooh.
I want to see if you can guess where it is just by these three hints.
Okay, I'm
Okay.
ready.
One, there is a very famous bridge.
Mm.
Two, it's on the West Coast. And three, they are well known for sourdough bread.
Okay. Well, is it? Oh, wait. I'm not allowed to get any more hints, right? Like, I can't ask if it's a US city,
Oh
state.
yeah, it's not 20 questions, it's
All right, all
three
right.
and see if
Don't
you
get
can guess
greedy.
it.
All right, all right, all right. Well, first things that come to mind with the bread, but not sourdough. I was gonna say like France, but Paris, but no. And bridges. Ooh, Brooklyn Bridge. Ooh,
Well, don't
I feel like
forget my
that's
second clue was West Coast.
oh, duh. Okay. I was gonna say, first of all, that would be too basic. All right. West Coast. Okay, well, I'm just gonna go with the New York of the West Coast. I'm gonna go with San Francisco.
Ding 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 ding.
Woo! We
You
did it.
got it.
Sweet San
Okay,
Francisco.
yeah, we are in San Francisco today. And okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about San Francisco in general and kind of what it's known for. And it it I'll tell you this, it's probably one of the better known cities in the US.
Right.
Like I feel like everybody knows San Francisco, the Bay Area. It's very, very
The
popular.
Bay Area.
It's definitely a tourist destination.
Trap.
Um,
Just
but
kidding.
it's so it's located in Northern California on the Pacific Ocean, as I said, West Coast. It's truly, literally on the West Coast.
Down on the
And
West Coast.
oh, what song is that? Wait,
They
what?
like the movies. Lana Del Rey. Shout out to my girl, Lana
Oh,
Del
I
Rey.
love
We're
it. Okay,
we're
a little
close. We're tight.
soundtrack for the West Coast.
Yeah.
So San Francisco and the Bay Area, which I feel like it took me a long time to realize that when people talked about the Bay Area, that they were talking about San Francisco Bay Area. Like that's what it is. So
Mhm.
people will refer to it as San Fran, San Francisco, or the Bay Area. But no matter what you call it, it is a global center of economic activity
Mhm.
and the arts and sciences. So it's pretty popular for a lot of different reasons. But I would say, although it's known for a lot of things, it is especially known for being a hub for hippies and the peace movement of the 60s and 70s. So when I think of like a lot of the iconic photos from that era and a lot of the different cities that were centers for the peace movement, you think of Chicago, New York, and San Francisco. Like
Mhm.
those are like the big ones. Now, granted, there are other cities. Obviously, the whole United States was going through a lot during the 60s and 70s, but San Fran really was, in so many ways, the heartbeat of the hippie movement and the peace and love movement.
Make love, not war.
That's great. That's San Fran for you right
So
there.
San Fran.
But it's also known for its geography and for the things you can explore while you're there. So it's the kind of destination that you can visit year round. But I
Mhm.
will say, when you talk about when specifically to go to San Fran, I would suggest the late summer and early fall. Those are often considered the best months to visit. Part of this is because San Francisco is really tough when it comes to temperature and weather. So late summer, early fall usually offers warmer temperatures, less fog, and fewer crowds. And when I visited San Francisco last year, I was there in mid-August and it was truly chef's kiss amazing. The weather was beautiful, and there were definitely still a decent amount of people, but it was not nearly as crowded as I would have expected. And I think
Wow.
that it definitely gets more crowded in like late spring, early summer. But I would 10 out of 10 recommend going in the late summer and early fall. But here's a fun fact, Sophia.
Mhm.
San Francisco has its own fog.
That is so cool.
Did you know that? So that's one thing that's
No.
really interesting about the weather when it comes to not only when you're deciding when to go to San Fran, but also deciding what to wear when you go to San Fran.
Ooh, yeah.
Because, get this, the fog, this is like such a random, fun little trivia fact, but the fog in San Francisco has its own name.
Oh my gosh,
And
get your
you're,
own fog.
I know,
Get the
and
fog
you're
out of
like,
here.
and
What the heck?
And this fog has the most basic name I have ever heard. I was like, really? That's the name you chose? But the locals have been calling it Carl.
The hippies? I've been
The
calling
hippies,
it
yeah.
Carl.
So they've been calling it Carl for years now, and some people think that the origins are honestly a little bit unclear, but some people believe that it came from the Big Fish movie in 2003.
Oh,
There's a
okay.
movie that has this movie has a giant named Carl in it. And
Wow.
so some people think that it came from that. But again, with these kinds of things, there's always different lore and different stories that kind of pop around. But that's the story that I found was the most popular
I
as to
gotta
why
go
it's
watch Big
called
Fish.
Carl. I know, Big Fish, great movie. Definitely go
Okay.
watch it.
Okay.
But Carl, the Fog Carl, has its own Instagram page.
Did we met what?
Yeah,
Did we mention that Carl is named Carl? Because that's I don't think I'm gonna get over that. Like an
I
element.
know, Carl.
Father
Yeah, the
Carl
San
is coming
Francisco
in
fog
hot.
is called Carl. And truly, it has like thousands of followers on Instagram. And I'm like, who runs this page? They are brilliant. That is so fun because it's such a
Yeah.
cool way of getting people. I mean, again, as I said, San Francisco is already one of the most well-known cities in the US, but I think obviously, especially on the West Coast and that area of the US. So it's not like they need to have some sort of cool niche thing to get more people to come.
Yeah.
But I love that Carl has an Instagram following.
Hmm.
And truly, this particular fog is unique to San Francisco. It only exists in San Francisco. And I'm
Wow.
not sure of the science behind it, whether it's because of the fact that it's in this bay and on the Pacific and how the water and how the terrain, I mean, of course, it's all probably geography and science related as to how this actually creates its own fog. But anyway, I just think it's really cool. And all that being said is that when you go to San Francisco, I always look at my weather app no matter where I'm traveling, but
Yeah.
San Francisco is super kooky in its weather.
Yeah.
So when you go to this city, look at the weather app, but bring layers. Definitely
Yeah.
bring layers because you'll be in one part of the city and it'll feel so warm. And then you get on the Gate Bridge and you're freezing. And like
Right.
there are little microclimates because of this fog. It creates microclimates within San Francisco itself. So I personally was very glad that I wore like a pair of loose fitting, comfortable jeans that were breathable enough. And then I wore like a tank top, but then I had something that I could put over it. I had like a little like linen button up, but I also brought a jean jacket. And I will
Yeah.
tell you that throughout the day, at different points, I had all three versions of those outfits where I was wearing the least amount to the most amount.
Yeah, I will say, and I will totally second that I've been there like twice in like January, February time. Once like in January, for the national championship, like the Bay Area. And go Clemson, yeah, go Tigers. And like we won that one. Didn't win the one when I was in New Orleans, but we won the one
Mm,
when I was in the Bay Area. But yes, it was like it was cold, and then like when the sun came out in the day, it was warm. And so, like you said, I had all these layers. I had like boots on for like the mush and mud, like after it rained, and it kind of
mm,
because we were like trying to do some sightseeing there. And then the vest I had came in so handy because I felt like it was too hot for like a jacket, but it was too cold for like nothing. And then when the sun dropped, man, I was putting that scarf on, I was putting a hat on. And
yeah,
then I
the
went
evening's cold.
another time, yeah, in riding the trolley through San Francisco in the wind. I had like this little like kind of sweater scarfy. It was like bigger than a scarf. So it was like a wraparound sweater. And I was freezing. And I was like, Mom, I didn't bring a jacket. Like I was with my mom. This was way back when. And then in the summertime with the crowdedness, I would totally agree. Where like it's pretty in the winter, but it's really cold and the climate is And then when you go in the summer, it's nice, but it's really crowded. We did like Tahoe in the summer and then a little bit of
Mm,
Bay Area. And so that was just kind of like so many tourists, and it does get kind of hot. But I would say I totally agree with you that clothes, layers, leggings, jeans, like boots, but walkable boots because you're walking all around the
yes.
city.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. It is such a walkable city. So when I went to San Francisco, I was actually visiting my boyfriend Matt, who was doing a show last year in a different part of California. And I flew in and out of San Francisco. So I got a flight super, super early in the morning on that particular day that he picked me up because I wanted to visit the city. But it was like 2.5 hours away from where he was doing his show, which is going to be another episode in a few weeks.
Woohoo.
But he picked me up, and so he had um access to a car, and we drove around, which was great because although the city is so walkable, some of the landmarks you have to drive to and
Right.
park in order to then do it. Like you drive to the Golden Gate Bridge, cool. You drive to Pier 39, cool. You drive to the different spots, and we wanted to hit up as much as we could in one day because we were only going to be there for one day. But
Hmm.
once you find a good parking spot and then you stay in a specific area for a couple hours,
Yeah.
yeah, you're just walking all over. So you want to definitely make sure that, as we said, you're in layers and that you have good, comfortable shoes to walk around in.
And you're right because it is pretty spread out. I remember like either going to Little Italy for dinner and just kind of staying in that area, or like going over to Fisherman's Pier Wharf,
Yep.
Fisherman's Wharf. It's Fisherman's
Fisherman's
Wharf.
Wharf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, doing that. Oh gosh. I don't know what your opinion is about Fisherman's Wharf, but 2 times I've been there, I got sick from mussels at a touristy restaurant, and I like got soaked in soaking wet and freezing in rain the second
Oh
time. And it was just like, I don't
no.
know, it's not the vibe. I like other parts
Wow.
of the Bay
Well,
Area. San
we'll
Francisco.
we'll talk about it later in this episode, and I will tell you that I had a very positive experience.
Oh, good. Oh,
But
good.
these are the things that our travel brats need to hear from us
No.
is sometimes you don't always have the best time in certain places.
Right.
Um, but okay, so I want to talk about a few of the places to eat
Mm,
slash visit. So
my favorite part.
specifically, Chinatown. Okay. I
Oh,
gotta tell you, like San Francisco, as with New York, is very well known for its Chinatown. And so that was for me one of the spots that I wanted to hit up, and I wanted to get some good Chinese food. So Matt and I mean, obviously, a place like San Francisco is going to have so many great places to eat, but we did decide to eat in Chinatown. And overall, I just really enjoyed the experience of walking around, looking in the shops, and just kind of being in Chinatown. Of course, I've been in Chinatown in New York City, but I felt like there was something really I don't know, maybe historical is the word because, California and San Francisco have a sordid history when it comes to their Chinese population, their immigrant population in general. But with
yeah.
San Francisco and California as a whole being on that side of the United States, they have so many more immigrants that come from places like China and Japan and the countries that are on that side of the world. So their Chinese population is so vast and has such a deep, deep history. And as
Yeah.
I said, it's not necessarily the cleanest history. There's some dark history there. I would say if you're interested in that, definitely go read up on that. But it meant for me that walking around Chinatown, while it has kind of its like gits and gots and little like kitschy kind of things, it also felt really rich in this sense of like Chinatown has been here for so long, since
Yeah.
before California was even a state. These people were coming to this area and were developing a sense of their own culture within another culture. And so I loved that piece of it, but a fun fact that I didn't realize this, and so you may know this because you've been to this area, but the Chinese fortune cookie was born in San Francisco.
I did not know that. That is
Yeah.
really cool. I
Isn't that
okay, this
fun?
is this is the stuff we love. But I will also say though, some things I do know and agree with is I love Chinatown. That's probably one of my favorite spots in San Francisco as well. I went there like, oh my gosh, this was years ago, but when we did, you know how you talked about going into the shops and just like browsing and like looking around. The food, yes, is great. The year I went, literally got everybody's Christmas presents in Chinatown. Like all these like scarves. They have the most beautiful
Yes.
scarves. So like grandma, sister, mom, other grandma, like friends. I went and got like all these cute like bracelets, and they're not expensive.
Yeah.
And so there are these beautiful scarves that look like you got them at Dillard's, but they instead of being like $50 to $100, they're like $5 to $10. And like they were great. And I got myself some. So I loved shopping there. I love shopping everywhere, but I loved shopping in
Yeah, let's be
Chinatown.
real,
Let's
Sophia.
be real. I love shopping and eating everywhere. So, I guess I'm not like the standard of pickiness, but I
Hmm.
loved it. And then the food was great. The other thing I'll say about San Francisco with food, besides the Chinese food, is I had some of the best sushi I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
Probably the best sushi I've ever had in my life. And then in Little Italy, I went to dinner one night there, and that just like blew my mind. It was so good. I mean, it was like having, like Chicago or New York,
Yeah. I mean,
good
it
hole in the wall
truly
Italian.
is up there. Like I
Yeah.
really do feel like San Francisco, Chicago, and New York. I mean, they're some of the top three cities in our country for a lot of things, but especially I think San Francisco, maybe even more so than Chicago, but similar to New York, is so
Yeah.
diverse.
Yeah.
It
And I
is
think
so
that's what's really,
diverse,
really
which
cool
means
about it.
that especially what you're going to find as far as food is like everything is going to be so good because you really have people who know the kind of food they're cooking because they are of that culture.
Yeah.
And so having places like Little Italy and Chinatown, you really like hone in on that. And so okay, so I mentioned this in my hints. My third hint was
Yeah. Yeah. And
about
speaking of food,
sourdough bread.
yeah.
So this was also something that I had no idea about, but the city of San Francisco is known for sourdough bread. It was first popularized in San Fran.
Wow.
And so there are a lot of different places that you can go in the city to get really good quality sourdough bread. And
Mhm.
I love bread. I'm like such a bread person and I specifically love sourdough bread, so I was all about this. I would have probably just spent the whole day going on a bread tour if I could have had my way,
Yeah.
but we specifically decided to grab these French dip sandwiches at a spot actually in Fisherman's Wharf, and they were
Just
made
kidding.
with they were not oh no, but they were made with sourdough bread, and it's this
Yeah.
place called Boudin, I think is how you pronounce it, Boudin. But just a great spot where I mean, you can get all sorts of food there, but because we knew that we wanted a quality sandwich and we wanted it with sourdough bread, and my boyfriend Matt loves French dip sandwiches, he was like, let's try it. And it was so delicious. It was like the perfect thing to have in the afternoon. And we just walked around Fisherman's Wharf eating our French dip sandwiches. But I've also heard there are a couple other restaurants, specifically when I was doing research about San Francisco, that popped up. And one was Devil's Teeth
Mm.
being a really great breakfast spot.
Oh, yum.
And then Ria's and Boy's Deli are also popular spots that kind of kept coming up as I was looking for different places to eat. But in so many ways, I think you can't really go wrong with San Francisco, like the food options.
No.
And if you're looking for a particular kind of food, like I was finding really niche restaurants as well, with people
Hmm.
being like, oh, I was looking for this specific kind of food, like Lebanese,
Right.
or even like, Little Italy, getting Italian. You wouldn't necessarily think of San Francisco as being a hub for really good Italian food. But I think, yeah, the city, just because it's such a tourist destination,
Hmm.
quality food often perks up, right? It often
Yeah.
shows itself. So I think San Francisco is a wonderful place to get good food no matter what you're looking for. But because they're known for sourdough bread and Chinatown, like those are kind of like highlights for me.
Yeah.
That was what I was kind of drawn to. But some people are like, I'm not drawn to like the it factor things. Oh, you're known for this? Well, I'm going to do something else. But as you said, sushi and any sort of um like seafood or like anything like that, they're right on the water. So they have access to incredible seafood options. And we
Yeah,
did get some fish tacos as we were walking around Fisherman's Wharf. We were just kind of like going into random little spots and grabbing like little things here and there instead of having like a big meal. I was like, I want
right.
to try a couple different things. And we got these fish tacos and oh my gosh,
Mm.
they were so good. And I was like, well, duh. Like, I didn't even think about the fact that, like, hello, San Francisco, right on the water, they have access to all this great seafood.
Yeah, the seafood is like so fresh. I mean, it's so good. And I think that's why the sushi I had there was like just incredible because of the fresh seafood. And I will say that one of my favorite things is that bridge and Carl the Fog. Carl, Gary, Bob. I almost wanted to call the fog Bob or Gary or something. Gary the Fog. No, it's Carl. Follow him on Instagram. But yeah, I think that that is just it's one of those things that never gets old. And with Carl, it's always different and it always looks different. And from the sunlight and from the evening and with the fog. So I remember taking one of the coolest pictures of my mom and putting it on like for her birthday. We did a Shutterfly photo book and we put her on the front in that picture with the fog, Carl, and the bridge behind her. And I mean, she was not like super dolled up or anything. She's just casual with her, layers like we suggested people to wear, but it just is such a cool photo. And it's just such a cool place. I think visiting there is always just a blast. There's endless things to do. I do know that I had a friend who rode her scooter with her mom when they went like over the Golden Gate Bridge. They took like a scooter tour around the city, which sounded really fun to me too.
Oh,
Because again,
cool.
yeah, if you don't drive and you don't like take the trolley, like we said, it's more spread out than some other cities. And so like to just kind of cover a lot of ground in a few days, I
Yeah,
think that's really
scootering would
fun.
be amazing because, yeah, then it might take you longer from getting from one place to another,
Right.
but it might make it possible to not have to drive everywhere. That's
Right.
interesting. I like that idea.
Isn't
I would
that fun?
definitely look into scooting around San Fran.
Yeah, and I'm sure by now they have bikes. I would say bikes for this city are
Yeah,
a
like
lot harder,
e-bikes.
though, because
Yeah,
it's not as flatland as like Chicago or New York, where like you
yes.
can ride bikes
It's
around Chicago and it's easy. But
definitely
here
hilly.
is going to be a workout. And again, if you don't have like tennis shoes or like functional shoes for bikes, I would probably just be lazy and ride the scooter.
Okay, so other spots in San Francisco slash other things to do that I will say I was inspired by. Some people might not care as much about these things, but Sophia, I'm sure you have seen this movie, and I'm sure that most of our listeners have seen this movie. And if you have not, please go watch it ASAP because it is one of my favorite movies, but I think also a movie that is really telling of our era.
Hmm.
At least those of us who are millennials, we grew up with this movie, and it's The Princess Diaries.
Oh, I totally forgot that the Princess Diaries was filmed in San Fran.
Yes, it's set in San Francisco. That's where she's
Shut
from, and
up.
that's where the whole thing is set. And shut up,
Shut
shut
up.
up, shut up.
Shut up.
So, first of all, it has two of my favorite actresses, Anne Hathaway and Julie Andrews. Love them both dearly. And one of the things I remember so much about that movie is there's a scene where she goes driving with her grandmother. Anne Hathaway's grandmother is played by Julie Andrews, and they are driving around San Francisco, and she's driving a stick shift, and she's trying
Yeah.
to go up and down these hills, which again is like, yeah, when I got to San Francisco, I was like, wow, people really weren't kidding. This place is so stinking
Yeah.
hilly. And so she's driving up and down, and she loses control of the car. She, goes down, and then she basically there's an incident with a trolley car. And so
Yeah.
that when I saw that, it always stuck in my mind so that when I realized that I could spend a day in San Francisco last summer, I told Matt, I was like, I know this might be cheesy, but like I really want to ride on one of the trolley cars or at least like get a picture with it or like something
Yeah.
because to me it was such an iconic thing and it is an iconic thing about San Francisco is the trolley car system.
I thought you were gonna say, I know it's iconic and I really wanted to like put a tiara on and like try and drive a stick shift car and like wear a uniform. I was like, I could totally see you, Natalie, walking around like Anne Hathaway with your tiara and like your school uniform and like, take a picture of me here, Matt. Take a picture of me. I am her. What's her name in the movie?
Mia Thermopolis, Princess of Genovia. It's one of my favorite movies, and it, yeah, I could totally see myself, like I would do that for like a Halloween,
Yeah,
be
I
near
could see her being your,
Thermopolis. That'd be
I
really
could see her
fun.
being your hardcore spirit animal.
Oh yeah, for sure. But yeah, so for me it was the trolley car. As silly as that sounds, but I was so excited to see the trolleys and get to ride them. And I did get to ride one. And I also got to take a picture with one. So I was very delighted about that. But aside from the trolley cars, okay, here's another. This is not a movie reference, but this is a TV reference. If you don't know Full House, then I don't know who you are. You're not even
You're
American.
not this
But
generation.
you're not, yeah. And technically, I didn't really even grow up with Full House. Full House was like slightly before me,
Hmm.
but it's kind of one of those things that even if you didn't grow up when it was actually being filmed, it's still something that I grew up watching because it was
Yeah,
still around.
you know it.
And the famous kind of scene from the Full House, like promo pic, is in front of these beautiful houses in front of this park, and they're called the Painted Ladies.
Ooh.
And they're just like a series of really pretty, like small house-like apartments.
Hmm.
And that's supposedly where Full House was filmed. Like it's one of those
Oh,
little
cool.
houses.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of like a fun spot. And the little park area, you can walk around it. So we just found a place to park nearby and then walked over and got a picture with it. But okay, so we've already mentioned this specific location, but this is certainly the thing that I think San Francisco is probably most famous for, and it
Mm.
is the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah, definitely.
Just stunning bridge. I mean, there was this whole craze, right, with building things in
Yeah,
the early 1900s that it was like industry and like the industrial like bridges and tall buildings like the Chrysler Building and Golden Gate Bridge and Brooklyn Bridge and all these amazing, very famous landmarks in
right.
big cities that came about from, like, you think about, I don't know, the late 1800s to the early 1900s
Hmm.
specifically. And the Golden Gate Bridge was part of that kind of craze.
Right,
And it has just stood the test of time. Like it is an incredible bridge. It is not only a beautiful masterpiece of kind of art, it's an architecture piece, but it functions.
right,
Just like the Brooklyn Bridge, just something pretty to look at. It actually is a useful bridge that people actually drive across to get to where they need to go. But you can walk across it and you can bike across it. As you were saying, your friend who scootered, you can scooter across it, you can scooter under it, you can do whatever you need to do. So it's one of those beautiful historical landmarks that I would definitely say I was certainly drawn to going to. And if you go to San Francisco, it's kind of a must. And walking across it was really lovely. And it's
right.
not a short walk. I mean, I think it took us about an hour, maybe a little over an hour to walk one way. And we
Right.
walked the whole way and then we turned back. And it was just really, really nice. And, we got our exercise and we also got to be on this really cool, amazing bridge. So that's definitely a spot. And in general, so I just really, wherever I go, I like to walk around downtown. I
Hmm.
just like to take in the energy of downtown during the day, during the evening, whenever I can go. And so it was really nice to just experience different pockets of downtown and walk around and again see the historical parts, but also see how it's been modernized and all of that. So I enjoyed that. But I don't know if you went to the street when you were in San Francisco, but it's a famous and very popular street. It's called Lombard Street. Did you
Yeah, the
ever
famous
go there?
zigzag street.
Zigzagging street. It's so crazy. And it truly, the zigzag is the angle that it zigzags on is very sharp. And
Crazy.
driving it is kind of scary. Like
Yeah.
it was cool, but a little bit like nerve-wracking at the same time. So we walked it and we also drove it.
Oh, cool.
And that was just like fun to get to experience this street that has these really beautiful kind of curvy, windy roads, and you get to see from the top of the street, you can see all these buildings in the city, and it's just a really neat view of the overall landscape of the city itself and some of its like apartment and housing buildings.
That's
So
one of
that
those
was
things I think is so cool is like New York and Chicago, obviously buildings are different, but they are like concrete jungles, where like San Francisco is such a different feel. The streets are a
yeah,
different feel. The apartments, the townhomes are like so cute. I mean, and you have cute townhomes in the other cities, but it's just such a
right.
different vibe. And I think that's really fun to go see where you're like, oh, I wasn't necessarily expecting this, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, San Francisco is it's really its own thing. It's
Hmm.
very cool. And having personally never been to California. I had never been to the state of California, and San Francisco was my first experience of it. And it was really neat to just see the terrain and just see how it's all laid out. And it's so different from these East Coast cities where I grew up, where I've lived, where I'm used to being. So that was definitely a neat thing to kind of see how different it was. And okay, so I think I'm getting to the last couple of places that I want to talk about, and this place specifically, Alcatraz.
Oh
Okay,
yeah. Escape from Alcatraz.
Alcatraz is so interesting.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something about Alcatraz. So it Alcatraz means pelican in the Spanish
Hmm.
language, apparently.
Ooh.
Like, I didn't know that. I'm not sure why they called it that, but it is this island in the middle of nowhere. You can see it from like I was able to see it from where we were when we went to Fisherman's Wharf. You can see it across the way. And it's a very, very famous prison where really hardcore prisoners, but it actually has a fort before becoming a prison in 1994. It didn't become a prison until 1990, or sorry, 1934. My bad. It's like, So 1934, it becomes a prison. And it makes sense that it was a military fort beforehand because it's a strategic place to have a
Right.
fort. And it looks like something that would be kind of like a Fort Sumter. Again, if you think of like an East Coast version of something like this. But there are a few extremely famous prisoners that were kept in Alcatraz, one of them being Al Capone.
Ooh, Al Capone. Shivers.
Maybe you knew that. Maybe you didn't. I feel like a lot of people do. But yeah, bad boy Al Capone. And okay, one random factoid about Golden Gate Park, which is at the base of Golden Gate Bridge, is that the Golden Gate Park is bigger than Central Park in New York City.
Wow, really?
Yeah, which
Huh.
is wild because you think of Central Park as basically taking up most of Manhattan,
Hmm.
and it's a pretty large park. And it's certainly more famous than Golden Gate Park, but Golden Gate Park is
Right.
bigger. So
That's
there's
pretty
that.
cool. That's a fun place to scooter through, as I talked about, or bike if you're really ambitious. The other thing I was going to say about Alcatraz is if you take a ferry and go visit it, it's pretty wild. I did that way
Oh, you
back
did it? You did
when.
the tour?
Yep,
Like,
did
I
the
would love,
tour.
we didn't have time to do the tour that day, but that was the one thing that I was like, man, I would have really loved to tour it because you hear really cool stories about touring it.
Yeah, we got a tour and we also got this movie called Escape from Alcatraz. It was really funny. It was like a really old movie, but it was kind of just fun to see. And then we learned a lot about how, it was obviously very impossible to escape. And, they had the shark infested waters and it was freezing and you die of hypothermia, blah blah blah. But I think a memory that is so fun from there is I'm not a huge like gift shop person, but I got this big old key. that was like
Oh
Alcatraz, like locking a giant jail cell key, and I have it like for a keychain. I
oh
was
my
like,
gosh.
man, I wish that was somewhere right here. I'd pull it back out and show you. It's hilarious. But yes, that is a really cool thing to do. But it's kind of like you said, like a day thing because you got to take the ferry out and
Yeah,
do all
it
that.
takes a couple hours. You got to like do the whole thing. So we just looked at it from afar
It's
and
cool from afar.
yeah, pretty cool
Pretty
from afar.
crazy.
It's so crazy.
Yeah.
I can't believe just the thought of being imprisoned on an island like that is just wild. But
Yeah.
okay, so now we get to a place that is controversial, as we've stated in the beginning of this episode, or
Mm.
early on in this episode for me and Sophia, because you had negative experiences and I had positive experiences. That is Fisherman's Wharf slash
Yes.
Pier 39. So I was there on a particularly gorgeous day. There were like almost no clouds in the sky. The weather was stunning. It was just a really beautiful day. So for me, I can imagine that if it was raining, like you said it was on one of the times that you visited, and just
Yeah.
like it's just pouring, you're drenched, you're uncomfortable, you don't want to be walking around because it's like pretty much there's lots of shops and lots of spaces where you can go inside, but it's not an indoor thing. You're still
Right.
having to walk outside to get to all of the different restaurants and the different spots. So I could see why you had a negative experience the one time because it was so cold and rainy. And then the first time you said you got sick from eating, what was it? Bad
Oh, the
mussel?
first time I ever went, we went to a restaurant there and I got sick from eating mussels there. So it wasn't my best experience. Again, Fisherman's Wharf is one of those places where you gotta go see it, you know? And so like you never been there, you gotta go see it. You know, they've got the taffy, they've got their seafood, they've got all their fun little things to go check out there. It's Fisherman's Wharf, you know, it's a signature of San Francisco. And then once you go a few times, you probably like on following visits don't go there as much. I remember though, the last time I went when it was rainy, this wasn't the time I got sick, but I went there when it was rainy. We went to a nicer restaurant, like a fancier restaurant. I was with my aunt and it was the rainy days, so it wasn't that pretty walking along with our umbrellas and stuff. And it was chilly, but it was a good restaurant. It was a really good restaurant. So, you know, the
Had a more
experiences
positive
vary.
food experience.
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, shops there are all touristy. I will say, if we're on the subject of shopping again, the last thing I would say is, if you are like a travel brat shopper, and you want to like go bougie, so Chinatown is affordable. But if you want to be bougie, I remember walking into some of the department stores in San Fran, and it's actually really fun. The people that work there are really nice, and the clothes are really cool. And like, I remember this lady putting a Gucci scarf around me and being like, "Oh, that's amazing on you." And my mom and I, we were so funny. We were like, "Oh yeah, look at that!" Like we were like looking at it in the mirror and talking to her, and we're like, "Oh, you know, maybe we're gonna think about it. Like maybe we'll come back. Like we need
Yeah,
to go
just
get
like
lunch." And you know, so anyway, just looking around at like the different stores they have is really fun. But if you're looking for like an Alcatraz key or like a fun little fish from Fisherman's Wharf, I mean, if you've never been to San Francisco, it is a fun thing to do. I'm not a huge fan of like the Ripley, believe it or not stuff and all that you see in like every city, like San Antonio, all this. But if
yeah, they all
you're that person. It's what you want to do, you know?
yeah. I think two things that I really thought were exciting and fun about Fisherman's Wharf was that they have this very old arcade
Uh-huh. Oh, that's
that
awesome.
has arcade games from like the last 100 plus years.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Stuff
That's cool.
that you can play or look at, almost kind of like it's almost like museum meets arcade. They still have arcade games from, you know, the classic 80s and 90s and early 2000s arcade games, but they've tried to keep it relatively historical. So that was really neat to just walk through and kind of creepy too, like some
Yeah.
of the like little figurines and different things that they came up with, but you're looking at these things that, you know, in 1908 this was like the coolest new thing, and to
Yeah.
me looking at it now it's like, oh wow, this is so basic, but to them it was just so exciting and new. And so that was a cool thing to walk through. And then also they have an area where there's a ton of seals.
Oh
Do you
yeah, that's
remember
one of my
that
favorites. It's
spot?
so cute.
Oh,
They're so
it
cute.
was so fun and cute, and they're just like bopping around and lazing around and like sitting in the sun and then swimming and like the time we were there, this like fight broke out between two of the seals and they
Oh
were
my
messing with
gosh.
each other. It was a playful fight, but it definitely got a little intense and then some of the other seals got involved and they were like seals are just so playful and so fun and it was very entertaining to watch them. And I had never seen anything like it. So that was a highlight for me for sure was the seals. But another highlight, and this is the last place I'll talk about, is an area that we didn't know about before we went. Like I had, done some research of like what are the top places to visit. And this was not necessarily on my radar, but we just drove past it and it was a really cool building. And Matt was like, "Hey, we've got some time. Do you want to stop and just like look around?" And it is this area that's called the Palace of Fine Arts.
Ooh,
And it, Sophia, it is gorgeous. It's this beautiful park kind of area with water and these intricate looking buildings that look
wow.
almost almost Greco-Roman, they kind of
Ooh,
look like you could walk upon them if you're in Italy or something.
wow.
And so it's just it's beautiful and we'll be posting pictures on our social media, but this one was just like a total hidden gem even though it's not hidden. Like the buildings are quite big and the park is stunning, but it's not a place that I was reading about a ton as I was looking at things to do there, but it was definitely another one of the highlights for me because it was those places that it's like it's a surprise. You weren't
Right.
expecting to experience something like that, and it ends up just being really beautiful. And Matt and I, we love walking around. We love just walking around and enjoying the sights and seeing things. And so it was just really lovely to have kind of a nice little stroll through this park
Yeah.
and see the
Stroll
buildings.
through the park. Yeah.
And I was just like, wow, the architecture is incredible here. So, yeah, that's San Francisco, guys. I hope that you, first of all, are intrigued and want to go there if you visit the West Coast and if you're in that area of Northern California. But here's what I will ask you, Sophia. In your own words, now that you have heard a little bit more about San Francisco, and again, you have also visited, what would you say in a few short sentences are the reasons to visit San Francisco? Why should our travel brats go if they aren't already convinced?
Well, first of all, for our long lost loved Carl. Oh, first of all, for our long lost love Carl. He's our number one. And I would say, yeah, the Golden Gate Bridge, Alcatraz, literally from the food to all the culture you get to just the infrastructure and the design, like the architectural design of the city. It is just a really cool place. I mean, and you can be any kind of person and enjoy it. Like you can be a shopper, you can be a
Yeah,
foodie, you can be an adventurer where you want to walk all over the city. You can history. It's full of history, the bridge, the trolleys, again, the architecture. I mean, you can really immerse yourself in it whether you're there for 1 day, 2 days, a week. There's endless things to do. There's enormous amount of museums as well. We talked about some of the main outdoor sites. If it rains, there's plenty of things to do indoor. But I would say it's a very unique and very cool place to visit. And if you dress appropriately and if you prep accordingly, like know where you're going and what you want to do, and again, check your weather apps and pack what you need to, it's a really fun place. And I would say, like you and Matt, it'd be a really fun place for a significant other. It's a really fun place to just go with a couple family members. And I would say that like out of 10 to visit it, I would give it like a 9.5.
oh yeah,
And the only reason there wouldn't be like a 10 is because just sometimes the weather isn't great. But again, if you go end of summer, early fall, that's when you're going to get, not a lot of rain. You're going to get warm, nice weather, but not like sweltering heat. You're not going to run into tourists. And yeah, I mean, you can't beat a visit there. I will say, with all the laws, and I'm not going to get into politics, but I'm just saying with all the laws, it's a little less safe than it used to be, but so is every city. I mean, we live in the United States, you know, you turn a wrong corner, you just need to know where you're going and know walking down, you know, dark street alleys in the middle of the night, you know, guys, just don't be stupid and, you know,
Yeah,
you should
make
be
safe
fine.
big city decisions.
Make big city decisions. Exactly. So no, I give
Yeah.
it a literally a 9.5. And if you've never been and you've never been to California, then I think San Francisco is one of the first places you should visit.
Yeah, I for sure agree. All right, guys. Well, we'll catch you next time.
Catch you next time. Travel Brats out.